With inventory on used cars being short nowadays, it can be tempting to go to an insurance auto auction or a Copart auction to buy a car. And whether you're flipping cars or you're buying a car for yourself, these auctions are a straight up gamble. So today we're going to go over my 5 worst purchases that I've bought from one of these auctions and what you can do to not end up with a bunch of broken junk cars like me. Now, for those who don't know, these auctions are held by companies that take insurance claims and other repos, bring them into a field, take pictures of them, and then auction them off online. Now, they do provide you some information like whether it has a clear title or not, if it's labeled a run and drive or a stationary. Basically, this means if it's labeled a run and drive, the car is supposed to be able to start and at least go in gear. If it's stationary, the car does not even start. And if it just says the car starts, that means it'll start, but it won't move under its own power. Now, you cannot take these labels to a 100% accuracy because I've bought in cars that were supposedly stationary and I got them back to the shop and got them to run and drive. And I've also bought cars that were run and drive and had bad transmissions in them. My point is, the people that check out these cars and check them in at the auctions are not mechanics, and they do not know if these cars are functionally sound or not. So it is a straight up gamble just buying these cars without going there in person and checking them out. Now, each auction is different, but most of them you can go and preview the vehicle the day before the auction or soon before it is auctioned off. There is limitations though. You cannot move the vehicle, and some auctions won't even allow you to start or turn the key in the vehicle. Now, I had no idea these auctions even existed until a few years ago when a friend of mine said he wanted to buy a car that his neighbor wrecked, and he thought I could sign up for the auction to buy it. Turns out he just wanted a car for parts and we weren't able to get his car, but in turn I did find these auctions and I was hooked right away. My eyes stayed glued to a list of cars for months, looking at cheap, inexpensive, wrecked and abandoned vehicles in a field that I could just go buy for a discounted price, fix up and sell. Now, it's exactly what I did, and I have had some good success buying cars from these auctions, don't get me wrong, but just like anything else, a few bad apples can ruin your taste for something. Now, before I get into my worst purchases, I want to hear from you. If you've ever bought a car from an auction and it didn't turn out to be what it seemed, comment in the comment section below, let me know how it went, or if you need help with a car or any other project you're facing, feel free to email me at justcallmeeddie1@gmail.com, and I'll help you out as much as I can. So starting out from the top of the list, we're going to go with number 5, which is actually a Toyota 4Runner. This was a 2001 model Toyota 4Runner. It was a black one, and I had big plans for it when I bought it. It was sold as a run and drive, and it did run and drive when I got it. But when we got it on the lift, we found that the frame had a hole in it, and it had a bunch of other rust around it. I was able to fix the hole in the frame by patching it, which took many days of cutting, welding, and grinding down and then painting over it, to which I finally got it able to where it would pass Virginia State inspection. Also serviced the tran, got new bushings for the steering rack and the sway bar, did the full service on this thing, to which I found out that it had no four-wheel drive. And what's a 4Runner without four-wheel drive? And yes, I know they make two-wheel drive versions of them, but this is four-wheel drive and it should be able to work. I spent months trying to fix the four-wheel drive, replacing actuators, sensors, modules, and different things like that, and never got it able to work. It would go into four-wheel drive and get stuck. It would get stuck at two-wheel drive, and the dash light would just blink at you and just mock you all day long. I finally gave up on it and just sold it for a reasonable price to a friend of mine who needed a vehicle. He's still driving it as a two-wheel drive vehicle with a transfer case on it, and I believe the PCM is what the problem is with it, but maybe one day we'll find out. Who knows? Number 4 is a Mazda CX-7, and I bought this car with engine damage, and it was labeled as stationary, meaning it did not move. And I really bought this car because my dad thought it would be a good one to flip. Quick tip, if you ever buy a car that's labeled as a bad motor, take it to your shop and see if the motor will turn with a breaker bar. In this case, it barely turned, and when we took the belt off, the vehicle started right up. Turns out a locked AC compressor was making the vehicle not start. And I was able to get it to run nicely after replacing plugs and coils and injector seals. I did a lot of work to this vehicle to get it to run and drive nicely. I had to weld a piece on the intake to get a runner code to go away. I had to replace the whole knuckle on the passenger side. I had to replace the center display twice because there was a problem where the soldering breaks on them and causes an airbag light to come on. And then after all of that work, after all that time, I sell the vehicle, and 1 week after the vehicle is sold, the buyer tries to drive it to New York and the motor blows on it. What a nightmare. I mean, we had to help this person out, so we ended up splitting the price of a motor and installing it for them, even when we didn't have to do that. Number 3 is my Mercedes-Benz with a hole in the motor. So I got the itch to buy a Mercedes after I flipped one a few months earlier that was a 99 model, and it ran and drove great, and I really kind of fell in love with the Mercedes style. That wasn't until this one ruined the taste for me. I bought this vehicle as a run and drive, and it did run and it did drive, and it looked like it had been in an accident, a small one, where the control arm or the axle had been broken. It was anything but a run and drive when a tow truck driver got it to the shop and we started it up, and it sounded like there was no oil in the motor. And that's because somebody had wrecked this thing by hitting something low to the ground at a very, very high rate of speed, which destroyed the bottom side of the engine and the subframe. So when you get one of these cars, you have two choices. You have one choice to either try to get your money back out of it by selling the parts or trying to take it back to the auction, or you could try to fix it and get more money out of it. I decided to fix this one, and I thought I was going to keep it, but now I'm so tired of fixing it up, I'm going to sell it. So here's the breakdown of what I did. I had to buy a motor and a subframe to start with. I removed the transmission, got the motor out of it with the subframe. I then had to line back up the subframe where it would bolt back on the car nicely. Then we put the motor back on, put the transmission back in, and this all took a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of parts. Not to mention we had to replace the airbag and all the seat belts in the car to get it legal for state inspection, do a wheel bearing on it, as well as a bearing on the axle, service the transmission, put a new radiator, AC compressor, and AC condenser, and basically everything you have to do to one of these cars, I've done it. And after all that time, I finally got this thing where it's able to run and drive, and it actually runs and drives nicely. There's a few cosmetic issues still left with it, like some plastic and some stuff broken around the interior and the outside. But other than that, I actually have a successful completed project with this thing, and it's awaiting a buyer currently while I'm driving it around here and there. Now, number 2 on my list was an ambitious purchase, to say the least. This is a 2011 Honda Accord that I bought when I thought I could really get into some body work and learn how to do it. I still want to learn how to do body work, but I just did not have time to work on this one. Plus, somebody hit it while I was sitting on our lot, and it needs a door as well as all the other parts in the front. So we got to a decision point on this, and I was going to fix it, and I started looking up all the parts and gathering them together, and then the door got hit, and I decided it was not worth fixing. So what did we do instead? We went and bought another car just like it. And this one had 265,000 miles on it, and it was sold as a stationary in that it didn't run. So my thought process was I'll buy this one with a good body and no bent metal, take the motor out of the wrecked one, put it in this one, and sell it and get out of both of them. Well, sometimes you get really, really lucky at these auctions, and sometimes you get really, really unlucky. In this case, when we bought this silver Accord, we got really, really lucky because we got it back to the shop and we tried to crank it up, and it didn't crank, but it sounded like it wanted to. So we kept cranking, and finally the motor started up and ran great. I was even able to drive it down the road 20 minutes after picking it up and bringing it to the shop. So we took this vehicle and sold it for a reasonable price, and it was reasonable enough to get us out of both vehicles and still make a little bit of profit. So now this black vehicle sits with no money in it, and we just straight have parts. And who knows, one day we may K-swap something crazy and have a little bit of fun. Now we're down to number 1, and this is my worst purchase at any auction that I've ever been to. Probably my worst purchase that I've ever had as a car buyer and seller, and it's a 2005 Chevrolet Silverado. So this is my most recent mistake of a purchase from IAA auction. You can see it's still got the sticker up there, and this thing was sold as a run and drive, clear title, no issues. It's only got 109,000 miles on it. It's full wheel drive, got the 5.3 motor in it. I mean, these things, they're worth a good amount of money, especially with low mileage on it like it's got. I already tested it. It does run and drive, even though that back wheel was locked up when we first got it here. So we had to put it in full wheel drive. So we know the full wheel drive works as well. The inside is pretty nice. Seats are still together. You can sit up in it. I mean, it's still a pretty nice truck in here. You know, it doesn't look that bad, but once we got it on the lift, and I don't have video of it on the lift, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it, or let me get up underneath of it. If you're buying these cars, you always want to go look at them in person, because you're gonna see things they're not gonna show in the pictures, like that rust right there and this frame right here, which is not in the best shape. There's a hole in that frame. The back is the worst back here, and you can see somebody put a 2x4 in there. That's because that strut bracket broke right off from the rust. So this is what we're doing to go ahead and repair that truck. We're gonna fix it. You know, I told you there's two options of what you can do. You can either fix it or just take your loss and try to dump it somehow, but we're gonna try to fix that truck. We found a frame at a junkyard. It's in a lot better condition. I can actually, you know, stand on it and walk on it. To say I'm in over my head is an understatement. I am well over my head in work here, and I keep buying these vehicles and they just keep adding to the list of things that I have to get done. And this isn't even my main source of income. I buy and sell these cars basically for fun, to make videos of, and to make a little side money. With that being said, after buying this truck, we are on a buying freeze right now, which means I'm not buying any more cars from these auctions until I have this truck fixed. Last year's project was the Mercedes-Benz. Now this year's project is going to be the Chevy Silverado, and it's going to be the biggest project my shop has ever seen. And if you do not want to miss it, make sure you subscribe to my channel, as I will show you every step of the process that we do to fix this truck and all the other vehicles that I end up buying that are worth zero, and I try to make them worth something. But for now, you can just follow me on Instagram and Facebook, where I try to post weekly content about the day-to-day things that I do in my job. And as always, if you need any mechanical advice or any advice about any type of car to purchase or anything about going to IA auction, feel free to email me at justcallmeeddie1@gmail.com, and I'll help you out as much as I can. Until next time, whatever you do, however you do it, make sure you stay dirty, and make sure you work hard, and most importantly, make sure you play hard. You can just call me Eddie.